difficulty of the migrants' journeys. Okay, so just to begin with some historical context on the migration. The migration grew out of the broken promises of the post-Civil War, post-emancipation, Reconstruction era, which officially ended in 1877. And I know that Jim has spoken to you about the failures of Reconstruction, so I'll just briefly summarize how some of these failures motivated the migration. First of all, it's important to remember that northward migration was already underway as early as the 1880s when some black elites left the South. These earlier northward migrations were known as the migration of the talented 10th. By the 1880s, growing numbers of blacks began to take the first step in a series of smaller migrations by moving from rural districts to southern towns and then into cities. There were also movements to western states during the 1870s and 1880s. African Americans who participated in these movements were known as exodusters. In Oklahoma, some African Americans created all-black towns. The exodusters mostly came from right here in Mississippi, but also from Louisiana, Texas, and Tennessee. 650 residents of Memphis settled in Oklahoma in the aftermath of the lynching of black grocery store owners Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Henry Stewart. And here is a picture of the anti-lynching activist Ida B. Wells with Moss's widow and children. Moss's last words were haunting and struck an immediate chord with black Southerners. He said, "Tell my people to go west. There is no justice for them here." Racial violence, which occurred as regular as rain, was one of the major factors that catalyzed the migration. Grisly lynchings, the grotesque mutilation and burning alive of human beings became a form of leisure for some Southern spectators and prompted many blacks to seek physical safety in the North. Between 1882 and 1930, approximately 3,220 blacks were the victims of lynching. This meant that between the years of 1890 and 1917, 2 to 3 black Southerners were murdered each week. And of course, these are only the recorded lynchings. These statistics do not tell the entire story. So here we have a kind of political cartoon from the New Yorker where we see a parent kind of hoisting a young girl on their shoulders in order for them to see the lynching more clearly. This is a postcard that was sent from a spectator at a lynching, kind of commemorating the lynching and describing the lynching to family members. And this was also very common, that people would often send either pictures of a lynching and maybe even mark the place where they stood during the lynching. And then this is just a newspaper article that describes a lynching in Georgia, and here says, you know, hanged by unknown parties, which was a very common way of sort of saying that there was a lynching, but of course not attributing any guilt or any or accusing anyone for the violence that occurred. So the epidemic of lynching, coupled with race riots in Wilmington in 1898 and reports that the sidewalks of Atlanta ran red with the blood of dead and dying blacks after a race riot occurred in 1906, underscored the efforts of white rioters to expel African Americans from the city. Historians have summarized the reasons for migration as push and pull factors. Push factors being the factors that pushed migrants out of the South, and pull factors being the factors that pulled migrants to the North. Now, I think you guys have sort of talked a little bit about these push and pull factors. Can someone remind us of some other push and pull factors? We've talked a bit about racial violence certainly being one of the push factors. But can anyone remind us of either a push or a pull factor that played a role in the migration?
Well, one of the push factors was that with the Jim Crow laws, that blacks didn't have freedom to move about easily. And so they could not go, and even if there was an opportunity available, a lot of times they were excluded from it. Whites wouldn't necessarily use blacks to do business with, which is an economic factor, wouldn't allow them to prosper as well. In different parts of the South, depending on where you live, is what you could do, you know, actually accomplish. And we all know that people are cheated out of land and opportunities, and that was one of the push factors. One of the pull factors where there were people coming down and actively trying to recruit people to go up there, and a lot of times those people that were trying to recruit blacks were often driven away.
Exactly. So that we're going to talk about each of the things that you just mentioned. But thank you very much, because that gives us a good sense of some of these push and pull factors. So the collapse of the cotton economy due to an infestation of a pest called the boll weevil also created another push factor. And then other pull factors included the outbreak of World War I in August of 1914, which spurred a dramatic demographic shift. Decreased foreign immigration led to a heightened demand for workers in American cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York. The war created a severe labor shortage in the industrial North as European immigrants who had stoked American industrial expansion for almost a century could no longer cross the wartime Atlantic. And labor agents, just as you were saying, transmitted information about new employment opportunities and assisted migrants. Labor agents became convenient scapegoats for white Southerners who preferred not to confront the reasons underlying the migration. A newspaper in Nashville insisted that the Negroes who have gone north haven't gone because of any bad treatment accorded them here. They have gone because agents in search of labor have come to the South and offered them higher wages. African Americans' experiences in World War I also served as an important push factor. President Woodrow Wilson's call for Americans to go to war to make the world safe for democracy gave African Americans the language and the leverage they needed to voice issues of inclusion and racial justice into the public conversation.